5 forwards, 3 defensemen signed yesterday.
I think the message is pretty clear. This team needs to take a step forward this year. Identified this team's biggest weaknesses, which was that number 2 center spot, the entire left side of the defense, and the power play. Steve Yzerman has preached over and over again, one of the big things he values as a GM is flexibility, and he has that now.
Joined by our favorite gentleman from the Winged Wheel podcast, Ryan, Hannah, and Brad. Brad, I'll start with you, Brad. I gotta say, yesterday was... Fish, shut the hell up.
My mic was muted. I can't cheer on my team?
No, you can't, Fish. I'm trying to do an interview here. Jesus Christ. What's up, guys? Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, look, I got to start with this and make sure Bus B's turned on so we can hear them, Chris. Having said that, guys, I want to start with this. 5 forwards, 3 defensemen signed yesterday by Steve Yzerman. Walk me through your initial reaction. I know some of the signings you weren't the biggest fan of, whether it was for contractual reasons or maybe just fit, but this is a team that's added 8 new players. Roster spots are few and far between now going into the season. For me, the message Steve Yzerman sent was, I'm not going to let Derek Lalonde fail. I'm not going to let him go out there and get 67, 73, 75 points in his first year. What's the message and takeaway from yesterday for you guys?
I think the message is pretty clear. This team needs to take a step forward this year. I don't think that necessarily means playoffs, because the Atlantic Division and the East as a whole is really, really deep, really stacked. And obviously Ottawa did a lot of similar things to Detroit yesterday. But I think we were all curious to see what the direction was going to be. It's going to be a good draft upcoming year. Could you see the Red Wings taking a step back this year, trading off a couple big pieces and taking one more big kick at the lottery? Very clearly, that's not the case. Andrew Kopp being the first signing of the day, probably the biggest signing of the day as well, filling that number 2 center spot for a pretty significant contract, probably a year longer than you would like, but about the annual average you would expect. You know, that kind of tipped Yzerman's hand pretty early in the day as to what he was thinking, and then the Mata signing comes down, and you're thinking, okay, yeah, there was a pretty big hole on left D, that makes sense. And then the Sherratt contract comes down, and you're like, okay, well, there was many holes on left D, so that also makes sense. And then the Perron signing came down. You're like, yep, okay, well, they were missing a right shot forward pretty desperately, especially someone who could help on the power play. So that makes sense, but that's a lot of signings. And then the Kubalik contract came down. And it was, you know, at that point, abundantly clear Yzerman identified this team's biggest weaknesses, which was that number 2 center spot, the entire left side of the defense, and the power play, where, you know, Perron and Kubalik specifically will help a lot. So, again, I want to temper everybody's expectations. This team definitely has a very real shot at the playoffs, but I don't think that's the expectation. Again, Tampa, Florida, Toronto, they're not taking a step back this year. Boston will be good again, although they are going to be very injured for the first couple months of the season, so that could be the window for the Red Wings to, you know, really put some distance between them and the Bruins and take an actual run at the playoffs. And of course, you know, Ottawa and Buffalo improved, so they should take step forwards like Detroit this year. But yeah, definitively we can say this is a significantly better team than they were, you know, 24 hours ago.
Prior to yesterday, we talked a lot about the youth on this team, who possibly could get a call up to the roster. And now that you've signed 8 players, what does that mean for some of the players? Simon Edvinsson, you could look at some of the other guys on the team. We talked about Jonathan Berggren possibly becoming a 4th-line centerman, maybe. Does that all change after yesterday? And is it possible we see some of these young kids this year?
It's still possible. I mean, it is hockey. There's going to be injuries. Things are going to happen. There could still be trades. The one thing that a lot of Yzerman's moves did yesterday was allow him a lot of flexibility in terms of roster construction, in terms of potential trades. He still has, I think, over 10 million cap space if you want to bring in even more players. But specifically for Edvinsson and Berggren, because they were the 2 guys that had the best shot at cracking the roster. For Edmondson, I don't think it changes anything. If he comes into camp in preseason and just, blows the doors off it like Lucas Raymond did last year, they'll put him on the team. Even though I really don't like Ben Sherratt's contract, I like Ben Sherratt, the player. And the one benefit with him is he's able to flex from left side or right side of the defense. So even though he shoots left, that doesn't necessarily mean he can't flex to the right side to open up that spot for Simon Edmondson. Berggren's path got a lot harder because last year the Red Wings offense was, plug and play. They only had so many guys who could play a first line role, a second line role, a third line role. So guys basically ended up in their spots by default. That's not the case this year. So Berggren's going to have to walk in and take someone's job. And it's not like he has to take an Adam Ernie's job, because right now I don't even have Adam Ernie on my projected opening night roster. He's going to have to take a spot from a Michael Rasmussen, from a Philip Zadina, from a legitimately good NHL player. So not that it's impossible, but yeah, Berggren's really got his work cut out for him now.
Yeah, I'm actually so happy you brought up Zadina. That's kind of one of the players I looked at probably around 4 o'clock yesterday, once we had gone through maybe 4 or 5 signings. And I just thought to myself, well, what the hell does this mean for Zadina? A fourth line forward, a third line forward? Is he going to be productive enough? And is he going to have value at the trade deadline? And is that even the future of his career in Detroit? Is he somebody that you're looking to move at the deadline, or is that somebody we still have hopes for?
I think right now we still have hopes for him. I think this is his make or break year. Like, firstly, I'm curious to see what Lalonde can do with him. You get a new coach, a new voice, a new system. Maybe that has something to do with unlocking Zadina. But kind of to what I mentioned in my last point there, Yzerman has a lot of flexibility this year. So if he thinks a change of scenery trade is best for Zadina, he can do it, and he won't leave a glaring hole in the lineup. He did not have that luxury last year. But he can also shelter Zadina if Zadina is playing this year, because, Zadina got put into a lot of tough spots last year. He played on the first, second, and third line for different points of the season last year because, well, honestly, he had to, between injuries and other players underperforming as well. This year, he should be able to settle in on the third line, probably with Pius Suter and Dominic Kubalik, if I had to guess. 2 very good players who are probably an upgrade on who he spent most of last season with. And yeah, if you're playing on the third line, then you're not getting the opponent's toughest matchups. And I think with Zadina, it's entirely a confidence thing, because we know he has the talent to do it. He just hasn't done it at the NHL level consistently. So if he's not playing the Victor Hedmans and the Charlie McAvoys of the world, yeah, there could be, some more opportunity for him, and it takes the pressure off him a little bit.
For some reason, just a little feeling I have is there's still a trade to be done. I don't think it happens before the season. I do believe by January we're going to be having a conversation, Brad, where they're looking to move a quality player and maybe some talent for either a player on an expiring contract who's just a very good player in the league, or somebody who wants out of town somewhere else in the league, probably a goal scorer. And why I'm bringing this up is I look at Tyler Bertuzzi. What is his future in Detroit? I haven't heard anything on a contract extension. Reportedly, Larkin is getting an extension sooner than later. What's the window for Bertuzzi after all of this?
Again, I think it's wide open. Steve Yzerman has preached over and over again, one of the big things he values as a GM is flexibility, and he has that now. There's a lot of good options with Bertuzzi here. Obviously, first and foremost, he's a good player. So if him and Yzerman can come to terms on a contract, that's probably still the ideal solution, because, if you don't have to break up that Larkin, Raymond, Bertuzzi line for a bunch of years and the Red Wings get into their playoff window and he's still there and he's still contributing, that's great. But if he doesn't come to terms on a contract, or Bertuzzi's asking for way too much term or way too much money, yeah, you can now trade him and not have to worry about having this gigantic hole on the first line, because you have a bunch of players, a Verana, a Kubalik, a Zadina, who could fill in there. Ideally not Zadina, but he could do it. And it opens up a ton of possibilities. Now, what would that trade look like? I think that's entirely going to be dependent on when the trade happens, if it's before the season or the middle of the season, and if it's in the middle of the season, where the Red Wings are in the standings. Because again, I still think the playoffs are a long shot. So if the Red Wings are, say, 5th or 6th in the Atlantic, 5 to 10 points out of a playoff spot, they're probably not trading Bertuzzi for a right now player. They're probably trading him for picks, prospects, and younger guys who will have a longer impact on here. And if the Red Wings are in a playoff spot, around the trade deadline, well, then honestly, they're not trading Bertuzzi. So either way, it's a very positive outlook for the Red Wings. I don't think there's a bad scenario here. It's just going to be a matter of value.
I love it. Brad, one more question for you. This is a team that struggled on the power play last year, I believe somewhere around 16%, bottom 6 in the league, and also a team that gave up the second most goals. What does the power play unit look like this year? And again, I know the signing 5 years for Ben was a lot in your mind. I know the contract's a bit much, but excuse me, you've shored up the defense much more. Olimata now on the team. They're going to improve defensively, but what does the power play unit look like? At least the first power play unit line.
Well, I think with the signings of Kubalik and Perron specifically, that really opens up a lot of fun possibilities for the Red Wings on the power play. Because obviously on a typical NHL power play, you want guys playing their off wing on the half wall, and you want guys who can shoot to be in those spots. So, if you want that first unit to keep Lucas Raymond on the left side, Jacob Vrana on the right side, and, throw Dylan Larkin into the bumper where he's probably a little better suited, they can do that, and that doesn't leave this gigantic hole on the second power play unit like they had last year, because now you have Dominic Kubalik who can slot in there as a pure shooter. Like, the guy has got an absolute rocket. He should probably score 20-ish goals for the Red Wings this year, a lot of them coming on the power play. And then you could put David Perron opposite him with Andrew Kopp in the bumper. So, last year it was kind of a situation with the Red Wings where if you took off the Dylan Larkin power play unit in the first minute and a half of the power play, you knew nothing was going to happen the rest of the power play. So that won't be the case this year, because we know Seider, Raymond, Larkin, Bertuzzi, they'll get something done on the first unit. I imagine it'll be Vrana playing with them. But now all of a sudden you go from having a absolute chasm on the second unit to having 4 or 5 guys who can legitimately contribute there.
Well, Brad, I can't thank you enough for joining us this morning. Appreciate it so much. Give them a follow on the Winged Wheel podcast, everybody in the chat. Make sure you check them out on Twitter. I think Twitter's down right now, so you can't even do that. But when it's back up, get your stuff together, everybody in the chat. Brad, appreciate you as always. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Go Wings!